SAIIA and the ECDPM have been meeting here in Pretoria to discuss various issues of regional integration as they relate to different stakeholders. Why is there this emphasis on supporting Southern Africa's regional integration agenda?
Well, I mean, the project that this has been financed under comes from the EU-South Africa dialogue. So in a way that it stems from EU-South African relations. And the way that we designed the project with SAIIA was that if you want to improve relations between or inform relations between the EU and South Africa, you cannot do that without having a better understanding of South Africa's role in the region. So the focus then was on trying to look at what's taking place in terms of regional integration in the region, how important are different drivers in terms of policy, in terms of politics, in terms of private sector interests, and how do they kind of play out on the ground. So I think it's kind of driven also by a sense that there are a lot of regional integration ambitions that are not being met in practice. So it's also to try and understand then, given that whole context, what are the kind of the drivers and barriers then to achieving those ambitions that have been laid out.
What are some of the key issues that have emerged over these last few days?
The key point, I think, was about accountability and trying to ensure that these agreements that are made at a regional level are actually implemented and enforced. So a lot of the discussion has really been about how to bring that about. And what we've had during these 2 days is some examples where regional integration can be said to have taken place, or the Maputo corridor or cross-border initiatives, let's say, have been successful. And what we've been trying to do is to try and understand what have been the factors that have made that successful. And in most of them, it comes down to mutual interests or aligned interests, not necessarily to do with the grand regional vision, but really to do with meeting sort of national interests, whether those are kind of fed through government or the private sector. So one of the big things has been kind of how to get accountability to get these things put in place, how to kind of find where interests align, but then also a lot to do with the kind of the mode of bringing that communication together. So in some cases, I mean, there are some effective associations of the private sector, for example, in certain sectors, where they've managed to have a common interest and they've managed to kind of bring people to the conversation and they've managed to engage quite fruitfully. And so I think one of the big messages has been that if you can break down the big regional integration project into much narrower pieces, then that's where success has taken place. So in a way, it's trying to understand from those little examples, what the lessons can then be shared at a broader level. And I think those are kind of the main ones that we've picked up, I think.
Who will benefit from these discussions and some of the findings once you have had time to process some of this information?
The EU-South Africa Dialogue Facility, I suppose, is a sort of the primary beneficiary in a way, in that this should feed into the ongoing dialogues that are taking place. But because we've tried to bring in this regional aspect, I mean, hopefully, one of the points that came out of it was there's a proposal to have a community of practice of planning commissions or planning commissioners in the region. So some of the beneficiaries would be sort of planning regional governments who are member state governments in the region who are trying to kind of see how to link their national plans with regional plans and trying to better understand how to get some of these things implemented in practice. But I mean, more broadly, I mean, both SAIIA and ECDPM have quite large networks of policymakers, and I think some of the problems that we've been discussing here about Southern Africa are not at all unique to Southern Africa. So I think some of the things that we draw out will hopefully also be able to be shared into other regions and perhaps then feed into those processes as well. I mean, I think there's the growing understanding that in terms of regional integration, we need to go beyond sort of technocratic and policy statements and have a better understanding of what drives these things on the ground. And I think this kind of work that we're doing of trying to kind of take cases and really understand who drove it, where was the leadership from, what made the leadership take it up, and sort of the degree to which private sector gets engaged it seems to be key. And what we want to be able to do is then to try and see how we can draw from that for other regions as well.
Bruce, thank you so much.